Man, oh man, am I excited about this story. This comes to us via Nintendo Soup, and the title is all you need to read. Sega Dreamcast titles on Nintendo Switch, one step closer to reality. This comes from Nintendo Soup, and actually, if I follow the link to the source, it comes from a Famitsu article. So of course, it's going to be a Japanese, and I can't read it. Luckily, the people over at Nintendo Soup translated it for us. They said in a recent Famitsu interview, Sega's Naoki Hori said that the company is close to successfully making Dreamcast titles work on Nintendo Switch through emulation, but there's still one question left unanswered. And here's what that question is. Basically, there's two ways that you can really go about making a game work on the Nintendo Switch. You can, I'm sorry, a retro game. And it's weird for me to think of a retro game, or I'm sorry, a Dreamcast game as a retro game, but it is these days. Makes me feel really, really old, but what are you going to do about it? There's two ways that you can make that work. You can either emulate, or you can remake the game. Now, most of the time, emulation is really the only way you can do it. But when you have the source code of the original game, you can remake the game. And I'm not going to say it's through very little effort, because there's certainly effort, but it's not as much effort as it would be to start from scratch and completely redo it from the ground up. And Sega has the source code to these games, these old Dreamcast titles. And both approaches make sense for certain games. If you can get emulation to work, then that's probably the best way to go about it, because it would cost Sega the least amount of money in the long run in order to get their Dreamcast titles up and running on the Nintendo Switch. That being said, some games probably push the hardware harder than others, and this is very easy to explain. If you've ever tried to emulate N64 stuff, some games will run really, really well, and some games will just fall apart. I have a copy of Ocarina of Time right behind me on the shelf over there, so you know that I've paid for it multiple times, for crying out loud. And I tried emulating that on my Raspberry Pi because I don't have a connector that will hook my N64 up to a modern TV. So I tried emulating it on my Raspberry Pi to see how would it run. And I tried a couple of other N64 games to test it out. And for the most part, they didn't work very well. There were some games that worked okay. The games that were a little less taxing, a little less demanding. But for Zelda, I mean, even just running it on the loading screen, it was really having problems. Like you could tell, if you'd ever played the game originally, you could tell that it was just chugging, trying to run on my little Raspberry Pi, because the sound was in slow motion. The animation was really, really low, and it just didn't work very well. So Sega could easily port some games via emulation to the Nintendo Switch, but I'm sure that there's some games that really pushed the hardware of the Dreamcast, and bringing those titles to the Nintendo Switch through emulation probably would result in a less than optimal experience. So I love that Sega is working on this, though. I mean, we've got Sega Ages, which is basically, and if you didn't realize it, Ages is Sega spelled backwards, so it's awesome. But basically, they're bringing their back catalog to the Nintendo Switch and other platforms as well. So I'm excited about Sega Ages because they're doing other stuff that I really, really like. Things like in Phantasy Star, they are making it so you can fast forward while you're playing, or it will automatically make a map off to the right hand side. Those are things about Sega Ages that I love. I love how Sega is bringing these retro games to modern consoles, trying to fix all those things that didn't really work so well the first time around, but we didn't know any better because we were early on. So I love that Sega is bringing the Dreamcast titles, or they're working on bringing the Dreamcast titles to the Nintendo Switch. I think that that's really, really exciting. And I can't wait to find out what games they're going to bring. And so here's my question to you. I want to know, what Sega Dreamcast games do you think are absolute 100% must-haves for playing on your Nintendo Switch? I would say probably my biggest one that I really, really want, and this is going to be weird, I would love to play Crazy Taxi. I loved playing Crazy Taxi on the Dreamcast. That game was so much fun. It had a great soundtrack, and racing around that city, picking up people and delivering them to their location just never really got old. And I would love to see what I would love to be able to have that with me on the go. Let's see what chat is saying. Johnny Link is saying he wants Space Channel 5. Power Stone. I never played Power Stone, but I played Power Stone 2. That's supposed to be a really good game. The only other game, Mikey B. Playing says, the only other game that was hyped for me on Dreamcast was Marvel vs. Capcom. But that went on without Sega. You know, I really liked Marvel vs. Capcom. I thought that was awesome. Seaman, I never played that. That was the one where you had like this fish with a face and you could yell at it to get things to happen. I don't know much about it, but that was a weird game, and I liked that Sega was doing some weird experimental stuff back then. I'm excited for Dreamcast titles on the Nintendo Switch, and I'm very curious as to what titles you want to see on the Nintendo Switch. Let me know.